In 1982, an oil company drove up to the U.S. Forest Service office in Albuquerque and gave away a valley, 101,794 acres of northern New Mexico, a stretch of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains just below the Colorado border, north of a small ranching town called Cimarron. No payment, no royalties, just a signature. The streams inside that valley were dying. The main creek was cutting a straight, muddy trench through what had once been a wetland. And the fish that lived in it, Rio Grande cutthroat trout, a species Coronado's chronicler wrote about in 1541 in the state fish of New Mexico, was down to about 10% of its historic range. 19 years later, a retired U.S. Forest Service biologist named Bill Zeedyk drove up that valley with a pickup full of stones. No cement, no excavators, no heavy machinery, just stones placed by hand in a pattern he had learned from a Native American pueblo. In restoration circles, his ideas were considered nearly heretical. The standard solution for a degraded creek then was concrete, riprap, and diesel-driven machines. Today, more than 10,250 native cutthroat trout swim in those streams. And Bill Zeedyk, at 90, is still teaching that technique to volunteers who never saw the ruined valley. 3 things happened in Valle Vidal over 100 years, and separately none of them looked catastrophic. Cattle pressed the stream banks until the soil stopped absorbing rain. Loggers cut the ridges above, sending runoff downhill in volumes the streams could not handle. And dirt roads carved along the water became drains until they did what Zeedyk describes in one line. Mismanaged rural roads, he says, can gash a stream's channel like a knife opening a blood vessel. Under the surface, an even quieter process was moving. Ecologists call it a head cut, a small vertical scarp that walks slowly upstream, dropping the water level as it goes. Behind it, the water table falls. Willows die. Wetlands collapse into dry pasture. By the year 2000, Comanche Creek, the main tributary of the valley, was carrying so much dirt that its bed was 44% fines. Nearly half of what a spawning trout would see when it went looking for clean gravel was clay and mud. That year, the state added a 4.3-mile segment of the creek to the Clean Water Act Section 303D list of impaired waters. The listed cause was sediment. The trout could not spawn. The wetlands were shrinking. And that fish, Oncorhynchus clarkii virginalis, the southernmost cutthroat trout on the continent, New Mexico's state fish since 1955, had by then triggered petitions to list it under the Endangered Species Act. Comanche Creek was sick, and it was pulling a whole species down with it. Bill Zeedyk had spent 35 years as a wildlife biologist for the U.S. Forest Service. He helped negotiate the Pennzoil transfer in 1982 from the regional office in Albuquerque. Then he retired and did what almost no retiree does. He started a consulting company and drove 50,000 kilometers a year in his pickup, teaching people how to fix streams by putting rocks in them. The dominant paradigm before Zeedyk was the check dam. If you have hiked a national forest and seen a low concrete wall or a wire cage full of stones set across a small stream, you have seen one. The idea sounds obvious. The stream is cutting downward, so build a wall to hold the sediment back. Zeedyk had walked past enough failed check dams to have a 2-line explanation ready. They fail, he wrote, for one of 2 reasons. Either the falling water digs a scour pool that eventually swallows the dam, or the stream cuts around it entirely and keeps eroding somewhere else. The problem for Zeedyk was philosophical before it was engineering. Dave Rosgen, another elder in the field, said it best: "A river does not want to be a lake, and water has more time than any engineer." Zeedyk's method reversed the polarity. Instead of blocking the stream, he studied how healthy streams behave when nobody bothers them, then built very small obstacles that nudged the streams back toward that behavior. Think of the difference between yanking on a horse's reins and holding them loose. A yank starts a fight. A loose rein lets the horse find its own pace. He called this induced meandering. The stream does the heavy lifting. To make this real, imagine a summer afternoon in a mountain meadow. The water bends one soft S-curve after another. The channel is shallow and wide. On the outside of each bend, the current runs faster and the bank is steeper. On the inside, the water slows and drops sand, building small gravel bars. Willows crowd the edges. Trout hide in the shade. When rain comes, the stream spreads onto the meadow and soaks in. The water table stays high. In August, when the sun has burned everything else brown, the meadow is still green. Now picture the same meadow after 100 years of overgrazing and road drainage. The stream runs straight down the middle, cut 6 or 8 feet below the surface. The willows are gone. The banks are bare. When rain comes, the stream is too deep to overflow, so the meadow gets no water. The water table falls. The grass turns brown by early July. Zeedyk once said the hardest part of his job was not technical. It was getting people to picture the healthy version at all. 3 generations of overgrazing had erased that reference image from the collective memory of the American West. A good idea, though, does not restore a stream by itself. Somebody has to lift the stones. And in the late 1990s, ranchers, environmentalists, federal biologists, and sport fishermen in northern New Mexico were more likely to sue each other than to share a truck bed. That is the problem Courtney White set out to solve. In 1997, White, a former archaeologist turned Sierra Club activist, co-founded a small nonprofit called the Quivira Coalition. Its idea was to build what he called a radical center, a table where those groups could discover, sometimes reluctantly, that they wanted the same things for different reasons. The rancher wanted more grass, the fisherman wanted more trout, the biologist wanted more wetlands. The federal agency wanted to avoid the political disaster of an ESA listing. All 4 goals required the same physical change, water staying on the land longer. In 2001, Quivira put its first Clean Water Act Section 319 grant to work in Comanche Creek. $361,075. Zeedyk supplied the technique. Quivira did the harder work, getting people who had spent 20 years distrusting each other to lift the same rocks on the same Saturday. Forget the aggregate numbers for a moment. Picture a single Saturday in early June above 9,000 feet in the Sangre de Cristo Range. The temperature at dawn is barely above freezing. A handful of pickup trucks park at the edge of a meadow. A dozen volunteers pull on rubber boots and thick gloves. Somebody points at a stretch of stream bank that is bleeding sediment into the water. The plan for the day is not the whole stream, just this 30-meter stretch. There are 3 structures in Zeedyk's basic vocabulary, and the volunteers learn them by building them. The Zuni Bowl is the elegant one, a stepped stone structure like a small staircase inside the stream bed that catches falling water at a head cut and dissipates its energy. Zeedyk did not invent it. He learned it from the Zuni Pueblo of western New Mexico, whose ancestors had watched water move through desert stone for 1,000 years before any federal agency existed. The One Rock Dam is the counterintuitive one. Its name sounds like a joke. It is 1 stone tall, not 1 stone wide, a single flat layer of rocks the size of pumpkins laid across the stream bed. Water flows over it, but slows just enough to drop the silt. Come back a decade later and willows are shading the water in July. The post vane is the workhorse, a row of vertical wooden posts driven into the stream bank at an angle, redirecting the current away from an eroding cut bank. Volunteers call them the bowling pins. None of these structures is built with heavy machinery. Zeedyk tells a story about a hands-on museum exhibit that ran water through a sandbox and challenged visitors to prevent erosion. He set up miniature versions of his own structures in the water's path, then stepped back to watch. Visitor after visitor tore his structures out and built dams instead. That reflex, he says, is cultural, not engineering. Between 2001 and 2013, the numbers from the EPA's own success story write-up are these: more than 50 small livestock exclosures, 130 post vanes, several Zuni bowls, 75 upland erosion control structures, 8 miles of forest road drained and hardened. In the first decade of work in Comanche Creek alone, 150 volunteers gave about 2,400 hours of labor. They built roughly 400 stone structures and replanted willows along 5 kilometers of stream bank. In parallel, the Forest Service cut the cattle in the valley from 2,500 head to 850 and closed 300 miles of unpaved roads. Somebody watching this now might reasonably ask why the Forest Service kept any cattle at all. The answer is politics as much as ecology. Ranching in northern New Mexico goes back 4 centuries. Expelling the ranchers would have collapsed the very coalition that made the restoration possible. Better to have them at the table with fewer animals than to fight them in court with none. This was a rewiring of process, not just of species. It changed how the water moved. In the year 2000, the pebble count in Comanche Creek came back at 44% fines. In 2006, 6 years later, it came back at 3%. The gap between those 2 numbers is a stream that has remembered how to sort its own bed, for a fish that spawns by fanning out gravel with its tail and laying eggs in the crevices between clean pebbles. 3% fines is the difference between reproduction and extinction. Every trout hatched in Comanche Creek since 2006 is standing on that number. In 2008, the New Mexico Environment Department did something environmental agencies rarely get to do. It closed a specific impairment. Comanche Creek was no longer on the 303D list for sediment. benthic macroinvertebrate scores, a measure of stream health that reads the tiny insects a trout eats, moved from impaired to full support. A separate study published in the journal Restoration Ecology in 2019, led by Emily Silverman, used satellite imagery to look at similar Zeedyk-style projects across Colorado, Oregon, and Nevada. It estimated a 25% increase in vegetation productivity around the structures. Some deeply incised channels had recovered 10 feet of vertical sediment over 20 years. The chemistry came back. The bugs came back. And then, at a scale that surprised even the people running the project, the fish came back. The larger Rio Castillo Restoration Project, of which Comanche Creek is one artery, connects 120 miles of stream, 16 lakes, and 1 reservoir, what the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has called the largest native trout restoration in the history of the United States. In July of 2023, more than 10,250 Rio Grande cutthroat trout were released above a fish barrier completed in 2016, 1 stone at a time. That was the plumbing change. The rest of the ecosystem quietly rebooted itself. Stand on the bank of Comanche Creek today, and the meadow looks perfectly ordinary. Willows crowd the bends. The water braids into shallow riffles. A rancher named Mark Torres, vice president of the Valle Vidal Grazing Association, told a New Mexico Magazine reporter last summer that he has seen big changes every year, benefiting his cattle, wildlife, and the fishermen who now drive up from Santa Fe on weekends. The lesson, however, is not that everything is fixed. Anyone who tells you that is selling something. In 2008, the state closed the case on sediment, but in 2004, the same agency had already opened a second case on the same stream for temperature. In hot summers, Comanche Creek still climbs above the 23 degrees Celsius line that Rio Grande cutthroat can tolerate. That impairment has never been removed. Trout Unlimited biologists have found genetically pure fish in tributaries like the Rio San Antonio, and in those same tributaries measured water temperatures high enough to kill them. Molly Walton, an ecologist who spent years walking every one of Comanche's 15 tributaries on foot, put it plainly. The need, she said, is great, and all we are doing is putting in little stitches everywhere. The patient is still bleeding out in many ways. 86% of the remaining Rio Grande cutthroat populations live in watersheds classified as high fire risk. The Las Conchas fire of 2011, the largest wildfire in New Mexico history at that time, showed how quickly decades of work can be scoured off a mountain. In June of 2023, the fish was placed back on the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's candidate list for ESA protection. In December of 2024, the agency ruled the listing not warranted. The collaborative work had stabilized the species enough that federal listing was not, for now, needed. It is a victory, but a conditional one. Comanche Creek does not mean the Rio Grande cutthroat is out of danger. It means one stretch of one stream has held on. Most of the surviving range still faces the same fires, the same rising temperatures, the same slow erosion. What buys the next round of time is the ongoing labor of ranchers, ecologists, volunteers, and one 90-year-old biologist who still drives his pickup to teach the next generation how to place a stone. The work is not slowing. The Quivira Coalition, Trout Unlimited, the Carson National Forest, and the Pueblo and grazing associations of the region keep expanding upstream. Craig Sponholtz, a Zeedyk protege who now runs Watershed Artisans, described what is at stake in a way that reaches well past this valley. The water future of Albuquerque, he said, and of every city in New Mexico is right here. Nessa Rasmussen, Watershed Program Manager at Carson National Forest, said it more concisely. Resilience flows downstream, not just water. Bill Zeedyk has been teaching people to think like a river for half a century. He has written a book, Let the Water Do the Work, with his co-author Van Clothier that reads more like a field manual for humility than engineering. Almost none of the people who will benefit most from what he has taught have been born yet. Sometimes the most powerful piece of engineering is not the largest one. Sometimes it is a stone the size of a pumpkin placed exactly where the river was already trying to go. If the most effective way to restore a stream is to let the water do the work, how much of what we call progress is really just staying out of the way? If you want to see where this technique was proven at scale before Comanche Creek, watch our episode on Bill Zeedyk in Colorado's Gunnison Basin. Same man, same insight. An earlier valley, the one where his ideas stopped being heretical and became method.